Welcome back to the Lighthouse International podcast, lighting the way for your child to find their purpose and passion and live their best life. I'm founder and director Eliza Rivas, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about how progress is measured on Lighthouse International's campus. We will go through the Spark Studio, the ES, and the Catalyst Studio, as well as talk about how it differs from traditional K through 12 education and how our focus on character affects academics. Diving right into our Spark Studio, this is our youngest studio for roughly ages 5 to 7, and they have 3 as far as character is concerned in their studio: be a good friend, be safe, and clean up. It's amazing how many character traits can fall within being a good friend, being safe, and cleaning up. They have in their studio their promises, their procedures, how they kind of go throughout their day with a lot of pictures, a lot of things that are color coordinated. And for each of these 3, they have posters. And on the posters, they have, with their guide, come up with, what does that look like? What does be a good friend mean? And so some of the things they've decided upon together is that being a good friend means I am being kind. It means I am using gentle hands and gentle bodies. It means I am giving things out of the goodness of my heart, not in exchange for people doing what I want or giving me what I want. It means staying respectful and using my words even if I'm upset. It means respecting nature and animals just the same as we do each other. So they've come up with a really wonderful grasp of what being a good friend is. And they work to hold each other accountable to that. The same with be safe. Be safe is really about learning how to calculate risk. So we do not remove risk in our environment. There's a decent body of research that exists in child development all about the benefits of risky play and what happens to a child when they learn how to calculate risk for themselves and decide where their comfort line is. Now, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. They're not completely alone when they're doing this. As guides with the Spark Studio, anytime we see learners starting to do something where there is risk involved, we start an immediate conversation. Oh, well, what are you doing? Okay, that seems a little wobbly, or that seems kind of high, or that seems a little heavy. How are you keeping your body safe? How are you going to keep your studio mates safe? Do you feel like you can do that and be steady and secure? How will you get down, take it apart, whatever the case may be? And we talk them through those questions in real time. And what we've noticed is over longer periods of time, they begin to think through those questions on their own. And often by the end of the year, when we ask those questions, they'll have a whole list of ways they've already thought through that. Oh, well, this is what I'm going to do to be safe with my body. This is what I'm going to do in order to make sure no one else gets hurt, whatever the case may be. Now, obviously, if it is something highly dangerous or maybe life or limb might be risked, guides might step in and say, I appreciate your idea, and there's still a very high possibility of something really bad happening here. So I'm going to ask us to not do that activity until you can come up with a better plan, because it's my job to protect safety on campus, and this is a safety concern. And it's fine. It's rarely ever a problem because they know if they do come up with a safe enough plan or a safe enough way to go about doing whatever it is they're wanting to do, they will have the freedom to do that. And it really builds that sense of self-efficacy, and it builds the sense of self-confidence and my ability to know when enough is enough and when it's too much and I need to stop or I need to back away. The last one is clean up. And this is always a wonderful adventure from the start to the end of every school year. There are some children who innately love having things neat and tidy. There are some who love tidying things up, and there are some who absolutely do not. And so we talk about, okay, well, what happens when it's just my stuff? What happens in a shared space? Why would it be considered important to clean up my food and my drink, or to put away my school materials, or to not leave trash? And some of those things lead to in the moment conversations. Maybe my studio mate cannot find something that they were really excited to work on this morning because I didn't put it up when I was done with it. Or maybe my lunch gets stepped on because I opened it up and left it on the floor and then walked away, or all sorts of things. And they are involved in rectifying the situation, and they're involved with, okay, well, how do we handle that? So from now on, what can we do to prevent those consequences that we didn't like from happening? When I say that Lighthouse International runs on conversation, I am being 100% honest. There are so many conversations that we have, and this is really the guide's way of not stepping in as the authority figure, but instead empowering the learners to take control of the situations and giving the learners a chance to really own up to what they're doing, what they're not doing, why they're frustrated, so that they realize they always have a part in whatever is going on. Nothing happens completely to them and they have nothing to do with it and nothing to say about it, right? So it is not always a comfortable conversation. There's another kind of body of research, I guess. I did it a lot when I was a public school teacher, on how to have courageous conversations and crucial conversations, and all about how to talk about these things, about ownership and responsibility and the consequences of my choices and actions, in a non-confrontational way, but in a way that is open and honest and direct. And that is what we do day by day on our campus. And that is how they really begin to embody being a good friend, being safe, and cleaning up. Another thing that we spend time on building in the Spark Studio is the habit of plan, do, and reflect. Planning when I'm 5 or 6 looks dramatically different than planning when I am 10 or 15 or 18 or 25. However, they are fully capable of planning. Often, this is something that we do in association with our spark play, our afternoon outdoor free play, unstructured play with our loose parts. And planning can be anything from drawing a picture of what I want to build, or the game I want to create, or the imaginary adventure I'm getting ready to go on. It doesn't really matter what it is. As I build my skills in reading and in writing through my morning work blocks, I might add in words and I might add in sentences, and I might find it easier to explain from writing than just from a picture that I then have to verbally explain. While they're playing, guides don't necessarily suggest or be like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? They let them figure it out, because there is a lot of creativity that is birthed out of boredom, out of, well, what do I do with this stuff? I don't know. Let me think, what can I do with it? And guides will be observing. Sometimes they may take pictures or small video clips. Sometimes they're just observing and asking questions just out of curiosity. And at the end of our spark play time, once they've put everything away and we've come back in, we have a time of reflection. And this time of reflection are simple questions. So, how did your plan work today? Did you build what you thought you were going to build? How did that game go? And they get to talk about it. Oh, actually, I didn't build that at all. I forgot about that. Or, oh, I built it and I decided to do this too, and it was really cool. Or I started building it, or I started playing that, but then this happened and I couldn't keep going with it. So I did this instead. And we just talk about that, and we learn how to observe, and we learn how to think back on our choices, and we learn to decide if there's anything I want to change the next day. What this does is it sets our Spark learners up for success when they go to transition into the Explorer Studio, because in the Explorer Studio is when they start really having a lot of weight on SMART goals. They do have SMART goals in the Spark Studio. The function of the SMART goals in the Spark Studio is really to be able to focus, like to have sustained focus in a particular activity. We start off with a minimum of 15 minutes, and we encourage learners to keep going and keep going. If they get in the flow, they don't have to stop that flow. They can go as long as they would like to go. If they're really in there and figuring something out or working on something that is important to them in some way. And the last way we build good habits, hero habits, like we call them on campus, is through our bridge badge. Our bridge badge is a very loose badge, but it is how a Spark learner shows that they are ready to bridge up into the Explorer Studio. The bridge badge with a very motivated older learner, maybe like 7, they can power through this badge in a session or 2. For our learners who are 5 or 6, it may take a year and a half, 2 years for them to really get through this. And those are both completely fine. It's very easy to give in to the temptation of pushing academic success or those markers of success that we see in older learners down to these younger ages. But that really becomes detrimental. That's what we see in a lot of early elementary learners in traditional systems who hate reading, who hate homework, who hate learning because too much is pushed down too soon. There is an overwhelming amount of things that are learned through free play, through choice in activity, through learning how to be a good friend. And all of those things can take time, and it is okay. They have the time to take. It is a studio that is set up to last 2 to 3 years, depending on the age of the learner that came in. And even if they go all the way to the end and are 8 by the time they bridge up, that is completely fine. And that's really totally appropriate. In the bridge badge, the idea of having the bridge badge in the Spark Studio, this is the only time they're on electronics in the Spark Studio, other than maybe like a yoga video that we do sometimes, or a dance, mindfulness movement type of activity that we do. It's a tech-free environment for most of the day because they are developing the ability to sustain focus, the ability to investigate, be curious, and there is no need for electronics much at this age. Everything that they need to learn, we have the manipulatives, we have the hands-on materials to be able to do that without electronics. The purpose of the bridge badge is really to help them start to get comfortable with those areas of technology they're going to need to use in the next studio up. And so part of how they do that is through milestones in that bridge badge. There are reading milestones, there are writing milestones, math milestones, there is a computer skill milestone, there is a habits of a hero milestone, different things that show that they're ready to be successful in the Explorer Studio. And as they, at their own pace, finish some of these challenges and milestones, they learn how to take pictures as evidence or video as evidence, depending on what it is. They learn how to upload it into their bridge badge, and they have a series of cool items and privileges that are unlocked as they make that journey through their bridge badge. For instance, the first time a learner finishes a challenge and turns it in, they unlock their bin for the year where they get to keep their papers and their work. And in the next few milestones, they will unlock the ability to earn a clipboard, and they start to earn stickers for each of the milestones that they have for all of the challenges that they need over the course of those years to finish out their bridge badge. And it's a very exciting thing. We make a very big deal about it. Everybody celebrates. We have a 30-second dance party button that is reserved for moments like this or when a learner bridges up in between studios. And it's just a party on campus because it is always something to celebrate when somebody does hard things and when somebody reaches a goal. In the ES, those hero habits are built in slightly different ways. One of the habits the ES learners focus on is being intentional with their time, so that whatever is happening because they made certain choices versus life is just happening to me and I don't know why. How we build that habit is through our SMART goal system. SMART goals are set daily, weekly, by session, and by year. That is how they learn to notice their progress. That is how they learn to strive for progress. That is how they learn to have evidence of their best work and their best examples and build that idea of a portfolio to prove that they have done something, that they have mastered something, whatever the case may be. The other way we practice being intentional in the Explorer Studio is through pitching. And I am not talking about baseball or softball. In the Explorer Studio, they really begin to take ownership of their studio by pitching out ideas. So if I am really frustrated about something and we don't have a process or procedure to deal with that, my guide will challenge me to pitch out an idea and present my idea in a town hall meeting. If I want to watch a particular movie or go on a particular field trip or earn a pajama day, I am challenged to figure out an idea and pitch it to my studio to see if I can persuade them to come along. And there is a process. We actually have a writing badge that is a pitching badge. They can pitch a studio pet. They can pitch a field trip. They can pitch a community service thing that they would like to do out in the community. And they have to pitch it out to a veterinarian who has agreed to sit in on the pet pitches and will ask questions about care and maintenance and things to ensure the well-being of the pet that is being pitched. And so our learners take it very, very seriously, and they understand the importance of really researching options and knowing what I'm talking about when I go to pitch something out. This is one of those things that often make their way home when learners want something and their parents have said either no or not yet or I don't know. Do not be surprised to have a formal pitch given to you, sometimes in writing, sometimes with a PowerPoint presentation or Google Slides, sometimes as a speech with points and notes and everything. And I will say, as a parent of a child in a learner-driven system, I have often conceded because their pitches can be really thorough and detailed, and their arguments can really make sense. So that is a byproduct of that practice of being intentional with my time on campus. The habit of accountability in the ES studio is often practiced through promises, keeping our promises that we all agree to in our contract of promises and sign off on. and upholding the procedures that we as a studio have put into place for when those promises are broken. And those are difficult things to learn. These are things that can have several iterations. There are ebbs and flows, and it's hard. It is really hard, not only to hold myself accountable, but then the added layer of holding someone I consider a friend or someone I see every day accountable as well. There's a lot of emotion that goes into that, and there's a lot of coaching and guiding that goes into that as well. How is accountability done in a business setting, in a government setting, in a neighborhood setting, in a family? How do we do this? How do we hold a boundary and hold a line while still being kind and respectful? One of the things that they rate each other on each session in their 360 reviews is their warm-heartedness, how kind, encouraging, and respectful I was, and their tough-mindedness. How well did I hold the boundaries that we all promised to hold? How well did I hold other people accountable and hold myself accountable? I have had learners who have been in the system for a while even come up and ask a guide to give them a particular consequence, because even though no one else saw it, they knew that they had not held to their promises. They knew that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So even though no one was looking, they still want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And those are beautiful moments to get to, because what 8, 10, 12, 15-year-old says, hey, go ahead and give me that consequence because I know that I broke that promise or I did not hit that thing that I was supposed to hit. In the habit of balancing freedom and responsibility, we do that in several ways in our Explorer Studio. We have a motto in the Explorer Studio. It's work hard, play hard. We earn the right and the freedom to play by the amount of effort and energy and focus we're putting into what we have to do. We practice that balance through a system that they've created called freedom levels. Many acting academies around the world have freedom levels. In general, as owners and as guides, we are tasked with not putting those into place ourselves, but waiting until leaders of their studios have risen up and said, you know what, this is driving me crazy. This should not be this way. This is not good. This is not helpful. What can I do about it? And then we can offer this as a choice. So at Lighthouse, currently, we have 3 different freedom levels. Our most basic freedom level still has a lot of freedoms that many children do not get in a traditional school system, but it is scaffolded and it has more things in place to help them acclimate to guiding their own learning, to understanding how to hold themselves accountable, and really take charge of their education. The next level up means that you have been consistently showing that you can be responsible for yourself, that you can keep your promises, that you can show consistent effort and good attitude in your badge work, in our group activities, our quests, whatever the case may be, our discussions. And freedom level 3 is for learners who are not only showing that personal responsibility, but they are consistently showing that they are holding other people accountable as well. That they are not just concerned about themselves, but they're concerned about their environment and they're concerned about the culture of the community in which they find themselves. And they have found a way to hold people accountable in a way that people will respond, because that's also part of what is learned. Sometimes I will hold someone accountable in a whisper voice, but you don't have to if you don't want to, and nobody gives me the time of day. And sometimes I will hold people accountable, like if you are familiar at all with the Bible, there were these 2 men in the Bible known as the sons of thunder. And we have had learners who have that sons of thunder mentality when it comes to holding other people accountable. And sometimes that doesn't work either. And both no matter where you are in the spectrum, both sides have to learn how to bring it to the middle and to be firm yet kind and respectful. And so that freedom level is reserved for those learners who have been able to hold themselves and other people accountable, who make consistent progress, who take charge of their learning and do the right thing even when no one's looking. And they are the ones that get the most privileges. They can go in any of the studios as a helper. They can work anywhere. They can work outside, inside. They can work with the Sparks. They can work in their studio. They often are the ones who have earned the privilege of going out for leadership positions, like our Excellence Committee is our leadership council in the Explorer Studio. And you have to be a level 3 learner in order to be on the Excellence Committee. And you have to stay at a level 3 for your tenure on the Excellence Committee. And the Excellence Committee is the group that is tasked with listening to appeals. Like if someone is appealing a warning or the loss of a hero book or a strike, they are also the ones that are tasked with making changes to processes, procedures that are not working in their studio, and coming up with needed processes and procedures, and ones that they feel are needed, not necessarily ones that a director or guide is telling them. The last place we learn to balance freedom and responsibility is with a system that we have called Flow Zone. So we divide our morning work block into 2 currently. That could change in the future because it's always based on the group of learners that we have. The first portion of our work block every morning is dedicated to our badge work, the progress that we hold ourselves accountable to our families, what we set at the beginning of the year, as far as this is where I want to get to, these are how many badges I want to earn, this is what I want to have mastered by the end of this school year. And when we set challenging SMART goals and we give evidence that we have met those SMART goals in the first part of that morning work block, we can earn the privilege of having Flow Zone time. Flow Zone time is still a work time, but it is a work time where I get to do things based on my passions and my interests. For instance, Flow Zone time could be continuing on with my badge work. Say I'm reading a book that I love and it's a badge book and I want to finish this to get that badge. I can keep doing that. I can practice piano. I can practice foreign language. I can practice something with music or art. We had 2 learners this year. It was so phenomenal, who are very, very active and have a lot of energy. And they decided for their Flow Zone time, they were going to climb every tree we had around campus. And not only were they going to climb said trees, but they were going to rate the trees. And they had this whole chart, which trees were the easiest to climb, which trees could you climb the highest, which trees were the most fun to climb, which trees should you really not climb because they're not very sturdy or they're not very fun or they're too hard to get up into the branches. And they did this for weeks, and they went out with their clipboards and they were taking their notes, and it was really fascinating. And they had some great data. They had some great research and were really able to talk through at exhibition, for those who knew and who had asked, why these certain trees were the best trees to climb on campus. And I thought that was phenomenal. One year I had a learner who at that particular time had a strong obsession with woodpeckers. And that learner spent Flow Zone time completely researching woodpeckers. I think this was when Flow Zone was just on Fridays. And he spent like 6 hours researching woodpeckers, wrote up an entire report all about the different information he found out about woodpeckers, and was super excited to share that with us. And we were super excited to hear it because passion is contagious. And we love rooting on heroes who are finding their passions in this world. In our Catalyst and Launchpad studio, we combine Catalyst and Launchpad. They work at their own level, but they're often combined for accountability purposes. They are combined for peer review of badges. they're combined for discussions, and they're combined for their quests. And some of the habits that they work on in the Catalyst and Launchpad Studios include the pursuit of excellence. So excellence has a very specific definition in any Acton Academy. We do not compare a learner's work to perfection, but we do ask questions like, is it evident that you've given your best effort here? If this is something that you've done before, can you show that you've gotten better this time than the first time you attempted it? It is comparing the work that I've done with examples out in the real world. And how does my example measure up? It doesn't have to be the same, but there are certain markers of excellence in any world-class example. And how many of those markers am I meeting in my example? So in the pursuit of excellence, they're learning how to stay in that challenge zone, how they are pushing themselves just beyond comfort, but not so much that they break down or get overwhelmed. They are also learning the difference between excellence and perfection. And I think this is really huge at this age. So much of the anxiety and the pressure and the stress that teenagers and preteens have, I truly believe, is through this sense that I have to be perfect all of the time and I have to do everything all of the time, even though I don't exactly know why. There's a phenomenal documentary I watched when I was in my process to becoming an owner at Acton called The Race to Nowhere. And even the trailer, I think I have the trailer up on my Get Inspired page. It hit me like a ton of bricks because that's what I saw every day in the classroom. That's what I saw with my oldest. It's this intense pressure to be perfect and nobody knows why. Like, what is the end goal of that? Nobody can tell anyone else. So in learning how to pursue excellence, part of that is also learning when it's enough. Because there'll always be something else we can work on. There'll always be something that can be tweaked. There will always be something that can be better. And if I get stuck in that, I'm going to be paralyzed and I'm not going to get anywhere. I have to be able to know, you know what? This is as much as I can do right now. I've given the best I've got at it. I can probably come back later if I want to clean it up or if I want to come back at a different time and see how much I can further this. But I'm proud of where this is right now. And that's huge because it allows them to not have to get carried away into that overwhelm and into that anxiety. They can stop it before it gets there because they intentionally chose the end goal. They chose that through their SMART goals. They chose that through knowing what I have to do to get this badge. Okay, this is where I'm going to stop. I could do these other things, but I don't want this to take forever. I want to get done this week, or I want to get done by the end of this session. Another way they pursue excellence is through badge greenlighting. So there's a couple badges that require greenlighting or peer reviews in the Explorer Studio. But this really becomes key once they get into the Catalyst Studio. So it is like a quality check. Learners not only are holding each other accountable to their contract of promises, but they're holding each other accountable to pursuing excellence in their work. So in the process of greenlighting, I am trading work with another learner. We are taking that other person's work, looking over the criteria of what is needed to get this badge. We are letting the learner know where they hit the mark and where they need to go back and clean it up, try it again, expound, whatever the case may be. And this is really powerful because part of this process is if I approve work that was not done to excellence and did not follow what the badge criteria was, not only will that learner not get their badge, but I will get a badge taken away until I work with that learner so that it is done to excellence, because I am responsible for what I put my name to, for who I vouch for the work that I vouch for. That is really important and that matters. And so it's a big process in Acton academies. Another way we allow learners to pursue excellence is by allowing Catalyst learners to earn high school credit. If there's a particular area that they are very passionate about, they are very good at, they can pursue high school credit, even if they are 11 or 12 or 13 years old. At the same time, they don't have to. We do have a level of work that is just for the Catalyst Studio, but they are always welcome to push up into the requirements for the high school level work as well. Another habit we build is the habit of consistency. Consistency in focus, consistency in progress, consistency in the work that I am doing. And we do that in two ways in the Catalyst and Launchpad Studios. First, it's through point minimums. So this is something that is introduced once learners bridge up into the Catalyst Studio. There is a minimum amount of points they have to earn weekly in order to be in good standing on campus. And those points are decided upon between guide and learners. Every hour of work that they do that's focused work, where they're really putting in effort, so it's not just time on the clock, is worth a certain amount of points. And so those points accumulate, and they have to self-track those points. There are certain challenges and certain activities they do that have points assigned, and others they have to assign themselves, like for reading, math, some of their writing challenges, and that sort of thing. And they come up with what happens if those point minimums are not met. The current system we have was voted on and decided upon by a group of Catalyst and Launchpad learners, and that is if you fall below your point minimum 1 week, that is an email with your parents CC'd saying, hey, I noticed you didn't hit your minimums. Just wanted to check in, see how things are going, if you're okay, if anything is getting in your way, or it's just kind of like you had an off day this week or whatever the case may be. If that happens 2 weeks in a row, then it is a meeting between learner, family, and guide, because the level of rigor and depth in academics in the Catalyst and Launchpad Studio is quite steep. It is exciting, it is challenging, and it is rigorous. And they felt like if a learner goes more than 2 weeks with not hitting their point minimums, they're going to get overwhelmed, and they're going to start to get anxious and start to feel like they have to cover things up, and it's going to start to snowball. So at that point, we sit down as a family and be like, okay, something's going on, something's not right. What can we do to scaffold this? What can we do to help you? What can you do to help yourself to get back on track? Because once that keeps going, that's going to end up becoming a transition contract in which if a learner is just consistently not being able to hit those minimums to hold themselves accountable and direct their own learning, they will eventually be encouraged to find an environment where it is a better fit for them. The ability to consistently pursue excellence, to hit my point minimums or go above, earn me privileges. They earn me the opportunity to maybe push into lower studios as a reading buddy or a math buddy or a junior guide. It gives me opportunities to earn the privilege of working off campus. It often will play into what I get to do in my apprenticeships in the Catalyst and Launchpad Studios. So the pursuit of excellence and that focus on consistency really matter. The last habit, or I think more question, the Catalyst and Launchpad Studio focuses on is how my gifts and passions and talents can meet problems I see in the world and that matter to me. So this is really where apprenticeships come into play. This is where our servant leader badges, we have a series of servant leader badges that increase in sequence and scope. This is connecting with sheepdogs or leaders on other Acton campuses around the world. There are opportunities for that. And they really start to put those puzzle pieces together. So how can I make a living, and how can I make a difference in the areas that are important to me, and how can I make my community the place that I want to live and I want my family to live, and do all of that while using things that I am really good at or I am really interested in. How does this differ than what is often seen in traditional education? In this question, I'm really focusing on not the systems that teachers and principals and superintendents set into place. I'm really focusing on kind of what happens amongst the students in these environments, because there is often a disconnect between the systems that are in place and what is actually happening in the lives of students on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that's different is that in this environment, social capital is built on these things. The more excellence I pursue and the more kindness and respect and responsibility I show, the more social capital I have on campus. There's always going to be somebody who is going to try to gain social capital through acting like the class clown or trying to be, the bad guy. That's what was often seen in the schools that I taught in, right? You were cool if you were bad, or you didn't care about your grades, or whatever the case may be. And that's just the polar opposite of the culture at Lighthouse International. When those things do happen, it's kind of like, okay, and then we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So either you join what we're doing and you push and we celebrate you and we encourage you, or you're just going to be very, very uncomfortable and it's not going to be a place that you want to stay long. Another thing that's different is they are holding to these promises and these processes and procedures because they created them, not because an authority figure is telling them they have to. One of the things I talk about with learners and with my guides is that all behavior is communication. So even if somebody's not saying something, if by their behavior they are showing that they do not want to act like a hero, they do not want to take ownership of their learning, they do not want to, whatever it is that we do on campus, that is also communication, and we have to honor that. We're not going to force someone to be in this environment. This is a very unique environment, and not everybody wants to do what it takes to be here, and that's okay. There's 100 environments out there to choose from. You have to choose where you're going to thrive and what's best for you. And we have those conversations. By your behavior, what you're communicating is this. Is this what you want to be communicating? Is there something going on that you're not sure how to deal with or how to move forward on? Is there a way that we can scaffold you? But those processes and procedures exist and are modified a dozen times a year because they are the ones that are creating them, because they saw a problem that they wanted to fix in their studio, in their culture, whatever the case may be, and they took ownership of that. Lighthouse International follows the trend in most Acton academies of learners gaining roughly 2 grade levels a year for every year that they're in school with us. And that comes through our focus on mastery-based learning, the idea of these badges, and that I am giving evidence of progress, evidence of understanding, evidence of mastery along the way, building like a mini portfolio per badge to show I know this and I've got this and I have a deep understanding of this. That also is from giving them time to explore their passions and flow zone. And it is through challenging them to take risks and try new things in their quests, which can sometimes be focused on physics or biology or history or Greek mythology or robotics or forensic science. There's a whole slew of things that happen with our quests. But that idea of really pursuing it and getting into it and working to the best of my ability in it, it's amazing how much learning happens and how much shorter of a time because they have so much control over what they're doing. We often say that Lighthouse International is a place to fail forward. And failing is really hard for most adults. Watching your child fail is a million times harder. it is so difficult not to want to step in and rescue. It is difficult not to want to force them to do it. And I'm not saying that at home it's a complete free-for-all, right? It is okay, during these hours at school, you choose what you're going to focus on and what you're not going to focus on. When you then come home, just like at my job, I can choose what I do, even if my manager's not there when I'm working. But if I don't have the deliverables that I am responsible for having, when I'm responsible for having that, there are some natural and logical consequences that will be coming my way. Or if I get everything done early and it just blows everyone out of the water, there are also natural and logical consequences that are going to be coming my way. And it's the same thing with learners at home. So we, as guides, will not step in and rescue them. We will not step in and force them to do something. We will talk through, okay, that's fine. That's your choice. You do realize what that means is this, right? And you realize that that's going to affect this and this and this, and that could move your freedom level, and that could interfere with your ability to earn this thing that we're all, are working towards earning by the end of this session. But sometimes they're going to be like, yeah, I know. And I still am going to make this choice. And we're like, okay, well, your other choices are X, Y, Z. You can just sit against the wall and be bored somewhere. You can work on another core skill. You can, whatever the case may be, so that they understand that I don't just get to have fun either. Every choice is not a great choice. It's just a choice. But that walking through failure, walking through the natural and logical consequences of my decisions is amazingly powerful. I have story after story on what happens when somebody has just completely failed. A learner has completely failed at something on campus, and they don't get taken out of that. And they have to sit in that uncomfortableness, and they have to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And they have to sit back and realize, wow, everyone else is now here, and I'm here, and I do not like how this feels. And when they finally choose to do something about it, they become like a different human being. That is truly, that walking through failure and failing forward, I think, is the final showdown of almost every hero's journey in the Explorer Studio and the Catalyst Studio, because the changes that occur in learners as human beings on the other side of that truly blow you away. Families will often ask, well, how do I keep up with what my learner is doing on campus? If I'm not doing their homework with them and I'm not checking grades, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And we have some suggestions for our families. Now, it's up to the family if they choose to do it and how they choose to do it. But I will say, if you make the commitment to doing this in whatever way looks best for your family, a lot of that fear and that feeling like I don't really know what's going on is going to disappear, because you're going to be very, very informed in where your child is, in the battles they're facing, in the victories that they're achieving because of these things. So we suggest having a weekly family conversation with your child. For some families, that's going to be like around the dinner table once a week. Other families are going to maybe go out to a coffee shop or go out to some special activity. Other families, it's going to be on the drive home or the drive to a sports practice or a music practice. What is important is that it happens consistently. There's not a week that goes by that this doesn't happen, where you are asking, hey, what is a promise that you kept really well this week? Or what kind of progress are you making in your XYZ badge this week? Or what was really challenging for you? What promise did you really struggle with this week, and why? And having those moments where you're really connecting with them, not just performance-wise, but who they are as a person and how they're going through their lives in that particular week, so that you can encourage them or come alongside of them or share some of your stories when you were in similar spaces. That builds that bond and that trust, and that, that mentality that we are a team in this. We also suggest end of session badge plan updates, where your learner will open up their journey tracker or their math programs and walk you through the progress they've made this session. So I started at this percentage, I'm now at this percentage. These are the milestones I got done. This is the evidence I turned in. This is something I'm really struggling with, but I think, I've done this research or I've watched this video and I think I'm starting to get a handle on it now. Or I have just completely avoided this because I'm overwhelmed every time I'm looking at it. I feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm embarrassed to ask any of my studio mates and I just don't know what to do. And you're able to have that conversation as well. New this year is the idea of having a mid-action review and an after-action review. So midway through the school year and at the end of the school year, having a formal update, maybe in the form of an email or in the form of a presentation where they really talk not only about the achievement that they've had, but their victories, their successes, their challenges, their failures, what they plan to do differently next year, and how their progress this year has altered their plans for future years. I hope that has given you a little insight on all the different ways that we measure progress, on the ways that how we measure progress leads to a different culture and a different environment than what is often seen in traditional school systems, and how our pursuit of excellence, our habit of being intentional with our time, our ability to let learners fail forward, all lead to these immense moments of growth that help us do what we said we're going to do in being a place where learners can become heroes and can find their calling and can change the world and have that really dramatic progress academically as a byproduct of the character traits and the habits that we're focusing on developing. Thank you so much for your time.